Welcome, family, to another exciting panel at Elysium, Weekend of Darkness. My name is Elisa Teague, and if you don't know me yet, I've been a game designer, a puzzle designer, and RPG author in the industry for 20 years now, and I'm now senior producer of role-playing games at Renegade Game Studios. Today, I'm going to be chatting with our esteemed guest, Justin Achilli, and we're going to be talking about the Book of Nod and how to use it in your Vampire the Masquerade game. Welcome, Justin.
I'm so glad to be esteemed. I love being esteemed. Thank you for esteeming me.
Well, I mean, I know everybody watching probably knows who you are, but I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your history with World of Darkness. It's a long history, and what you do at Paradox.
Sure. My name is Justin Achilli. I am the brand creative lead for the World of Darkness at Paradox Interactive. And what that means is I set the creative vision for the World of Darkness and help create the, whether it's products or experiences or services, these sorts of things at a very high level. It's kind of like being a creative director, but it's not necessarily tied to one particular thing. But what I do get to do is work on individual cool things, like we're going to be talking about the Sabbat book today. You and I, Elisa, have gone back and forth a little bit about the Book of Nod and the premium version that you guys are doing at Renegade. I get to work on video games. I get to work on comic books and fiction and all sorts of great stuff. But yeah, and my history with the World of Darkness, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, way back in like 1995 to work on the World of Darkness back when White Wolf still existed. And I started with the Rage card game and then sort of moved up to, or moved on to different projects as they opened up. So I've been working on the World of Darkness for, oh my gosh, 25 years or something now. So forever and a day, let's say.
And yet it seems like time hasn't passed at all. Like I remember those early days at Gen Con and whatever, and seeing you, and it seems like yesterday. It's really weird. But
well, you wear the years better than I do. I've got a more gray going on, so.
I mean, it's my vampiric nature, of course. No, yeah, it's really strange, but it does seem like both a lifetime and just yesterday. And I'm just really excited to be working with you. You know, we've been in the industry together for so long, but we've never been able to work together. And so, yeah, now we get to work together all the time. It's too bad you're hours and hours separated from me in time, or else we'd get to talk a lot more, that's for sure. So yeah, anyway, back on topic. We're here to discuss the Book of Nod. Now, yesterday in the news panel, I got to announce that we are reprinting the Book of Nod, and that is very cool in itself. But we are also making a limited edition deluxe artifact of the Book of Nod, which is going to be a huge crate filled with the actual pieces that you could imagine that Aristotle de Laurent went around the world, put together, like was collecting all of this evidence and, stories and taking notes in his diary and taking pictures of things and, buying artifacts or stealing them, who knows, and putting them together in this big collection so that he could put together the eventual book that would be published. Now, we don't know how much of this book is the whole truth, and that's something we're going to really talk about today. And I want to talk to you about how does it go from this to your story on your table?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. Just to kind of, I guess, set the frame a little bit for those who are unfamiliar with the Book of Nod, because we're welcoming a lot of new players to the World of Darkness. The Book of Nod is kind of like the Vampire Bible, but it's also kind of like a collection of vampiric apocrypha. It is a collection of No one knows who wrote it, or no one knows reliably who wrote it. But as you say, Aristotle de Laurent kind of collected these pieces with other kindred scholars throughout the ages, and put them together in what is perhaps the most complete version of the Book of Nod, as you're showing there. The one that probably most people are familiar with. And what I think, when you guys submitted the idea for the prestige or the premium version of it, it just slayed me, right? Like, this is exactly how I see these sorts of things appearing in the world of darkness. Aristotle didn't go down to the bookstore to buy this thing. Like you say, he had to travel around the world, find these pieces, collect them, validate them. Beckett was doing some too. Sasha Vikos was doing some too. And so the veracity of any of this is only so true as we trust Aristotle as a vampire. And I don't know how many people actually want to trust vampires, how far you want to trust them. But yeah, the idea that this is a bunch of smaller pieces, these are the primary sources. When these things show up in your chronicle, you probably don't have someone showing up in the domain with the complete Book of Nod. Instead, they may have a fragment of the Book of Nod, and this opens all sorts of amazing questions that you can build the chronicle or the story around too, right? Like, is this piece that they have real? Where did they get it? Who gave it to them, or who traded to them, or who's coming after them now that they have it? Where is the eye of attention turning, that who has this sort of thing? And so you have a wide span of different kindred, even imparting different value to this. The Camarilla generally regards the Book of Nod as somewhere between apostasy and heresy. It's probably just a big pack of lies.
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, the Camarilla have been, actively, even if not publicly, trying to destroy any Nodus lore, correct? So, I can imagine having building in a lot of intrigue into your story, or your chronicle, even, of your players seeking out these things and trying to find the real pieces and getting rid of them. And then what will certain members of the Sabbat do in retaliation, right? So it's very, very cool stuff you can do at the table.
Yeah, that's a big part of the contrast there. Like, as you mentioned, the Sabbat, if the Camarilla thinks this is a pack of lies or propaganda that needs to be destroyed, to the Sabbat, it's holy writ. It is the word of Cain verbatim, and so they hold it in extremely high esteem. And so anyone who has a portion of the Book of Nod is probably going to be garnering some Sabbat attention, if the Sabbat is anywhere near that domain. And then, the anarchs in general are probably, they haven't really made up their mind on this yet, right? They're too young to really care about, the first city, but obviously all of these other vampires think this is either, very important and must be adhered to, or, this is heresy and needs to be destroyed. All of these things, can you imagine if this 13th generation Bruja ends up somehow with this portion of the Book of Nod, and all of a sudden all of the Camarilla elder eyes are on him, and all of the this rampaging Sabbat pack that no one had even known was in town is dogging their coterie. Oh my gosh! It's all of a sudden it's the proverbial hot potato, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of in a film sense, it's the MacGuffin, it's the thing that causes the antagonists to come start to act upon you. So here's this, you show up and here's your level 1 character who suddenly has Excalibur, and here comes everyone who wants Excalibur, right?
Right. It's like, I've got the most valuable wanted thing by both sides for different reasons, but also I want to get it as far away from me as possible, because you don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, so we're talking
but even
about
figuring out what you've got there too, like, is this
yeah.
a true piece or is this a false fragment? And so that's the beauty of the premium version that Renegade is doing too, is here's this very, it's a prop that I can enjoy at the table, that we can pass around the members of the coterie, and the storyteller can, at a dramatically appropriate moment, to steal Jason's phrase, bring this out to the table and say, all right, you discovered this, right? Or on the body of the envoy is this, or you break into the vault and this is there. And there's a gravity to it, there's a momentousness to it.
Absolutely, especially if the characters have no idea what it is. I mean, and most probably wouldn't unless they were somehow sent to retrieve such a thing, such a piece of this lore, a piece of this history of the Sabbat, Nodist belief system. So, speaking of that, we have announced that we are putting out the Sabbat the Black Hand book. And so these things do go hand in hand in a way. Once we have that book out, and then we have the Book of Nod, how do you see these two products working together?
Yeah, I think they'll work really well together. As we have established, we're using the Sabbat as antagonists in the 5th edition of Vampire. And so anytime you get news that the Sabbat is coming to town, an antagonist always wants something, right? So people don't just show up and fist fight. And so the Sabbat showing up in your town, especially if they're pursuing something that has a inherent value, or even like a mystical value, like these fragments of the Book of Nod to the kindred, it's gonna really challenge the status quo. Whatever's going on in your chronicle is all of a sudden going to be fighting for attention with, oh, and the Sabbat is here and they want this, right? And so as the Sabbat come in, you need to figure out who they are. In a lot of cases, they're gonna be the ones, setting things on fire and blowing things up. But in other cases, they're gonna be the ones who are sneaking into Elysiums, or moving in among the anarchs and telling the anarchs, these Camarilla jerks really aren't looking out for you. By the way, have you heard any rumors about this, heresy they're talking about? This is a great sort of thing to either, dangle as a carrot that can draw the Sabbat out of the woodwork. But it's also something that works for a great kind of Cold War style, or intrigue driven. Again, is this fragment of the Book of Nod real? Who wants it? Why do they want it? What are they going to get from it? Can I broker a deal with them? Can I make this out to be better for me? Ultimately, vampires being selfish creatures. How can I turn this amazing thing to my own personal profit? And
Naturally.
being able to do, there's a full spectrum. It's everything from pure MacGuffin to something that may even give you mystical power. There is a path in the Sabbat called the Path of Cain, and the Path of Cain wants to bring themselves closer to that first vampire, the Dark Father, right? And so as they discover these pieces of the Book of Nod, these things that either were Cain's words themselves, or they were the collected kind of. The Sabbat hates the antediluvians, the children or the grandchildren of the Dark Father as well. So, these are things that can be used against the antediluvians as they're trying to press Cain's agenda. There's just a huge variety of things that this can be used for, multiplied by being able to discover the veracity of these things. You get kind of investigative gameplay and, kind of sleuthing gameplay and black marketeering, in addition to all of like the open conflict that everything can always, it's the least common denominator.
Now, you mentioned, that the Sabbat, hate the antediluvians and this story, but a lot of people that are watching, don't know the story behind that. What is the reason why? I mean, you think, okay, I venerate Cain as the father of all vampires and follow all of his teachings. I follow everything that he's said, and I've taken the Book of Nod as his word, right? And his account of everything that has happened, like a biblical story, right? Why is it then that they hate his children and grandchildren?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Way back when the first, when Cain slew Abel and was cast out of the land of Nod and became the first vampire, he embraced a number of other kindred as well. And those kindred, he told, no more, right? This is it. I'm lonely. This is awful. This is a curse. Don't pass this on. And of course, when you forbid someone to do something, they're tempted to go do it, right? And so this second generation then embraced their own children, so these antediluvian meaning before the flood, the literal biblical flood. And so those are the origins of the clans. And so those were the clan founders effectively. But there were so many of them, and as you can tell by the characteristics of the clans, these were also the characteristics of the founders. They were in conflict with one another. There were these various vendettas that arose, and it's in the 5th edition we call it the eternal struggle, and this was the start of the eternal struggle. There's always some kindred in conflict with another kindred about something. It could be a grudge, it could be a differing outlook, but kindred vampire society was thrown into turmoil by these antediluvians, by these 13th generation, or excuse me, 3rd generation clan progenitors. And then, of course, these clan founders, you don't have a clan if you don't have anybody in it. So they start embracing, and they start embracing, and they start embracing. So it's kind of like this blood-soaked, murderous pyramid scheme. And to the Sabbat perspective, like, well, if we didn't have these antediluvians in the first place, we wouldn't have all of this trouble. And part of the kind of eschatological outlook of the Sabbat is, everybody, of course, knows about Gehenna. And Gehenna is the time when these antediluvians will rise and they will devour their children, and it will be the time of thin blood, and it will be this divine reckoning. And the Sabbat doesn't want to get eaten by these elders, right? They want their own vampiric birthright, basically. And so they despise what the antediluvians have done, what these 13 clan founders, the 3rd generation, has turned vampire society into. So they want to destroy them. And so anytime that these pieces of the Book of Nod show up, these are potentially clues to the resting places of these antediluvians, or they are indicators to, this clan progenitor wants this, so here's how I can strike against them. And so it is this, kind of combination Bible and kind of field tactics manual or intel that they're collecting on these vampires they want to destroy. And so, it becomes literal treasure.
Yeah, and so these types of hints at stories are what you can really incorporate into your chronicles. When you're playing the game, having your players, as a storyteller, having your players seeking out these pieces for one reason or another. There's so many different motivations there that allow you to build so much off of one single piece of text. And when I say one single piece of text, it's a lot of fragments of text all put together. Now, when we put this all together and we put it in the reprint book like this, because not everybody is going to be able to get, the artifact edition, it's a deluxe item. We know that, people's budgets are different. How do you see people using the Book of Nod as a full text at the table? What can a storyteller do? I mean, obviously there's a lot of lore and content in here that they can trickle out, but what else do you see as something that you can do at the table with the book?
Sure. In the setting itself, some vampires, some of these Nodist scholars, Aristotle de Laurent in particular, printed this book in the setting. So in the world, there is the collected Book of Nod that, a vampire could go to an occult bookstore and find on the shelf. And, this would not necessarily be the primary sources. This is Aristotle's, public, this is the Necronomicon, right? For the vampires. And so any given vampire basically has access to this kind of collected wisdom of the ancients and wisdom of the elders, and so can act on, it's got proverbs in it. It has warnings and prophecies. It has historical accounts of what happened in the first city. It tells the story of Cain slaying his brother and becoming a vampire, right? So there's all of these pieces of world lore that can, a storyteller can build a story around, but also that a character can dive into. Is your character interested in this Nodist history? Does your character believe in it? Is what Aristotle printed true, or is this a big ruse to kind of reinforce the masquerade where Aristotle's printing something kind of close to the Book of Nod? So like, for example, one of the mysteries that I've always loved about the World of Darkness is the Book of Nod has the words of the clan elders to their children. Here's these 13 different fragments of, hey, clan, do this to follow in my footsteps. But if you do the math, this is the third generation that said these. So they're 3 steps removed. And the second generation then is 2 steps removed. Is Cain first generation? Is he 1 step removed from himself? There's even mysteries that are implied here, like what's between the second generation and Cain? Is there something? One of the things that I like to do, it talks about there are 10 and 3 clan founders. Is that even an error of language? Is there 10 and 3, or did somebody make a mistake and this is 10 by 3? Are there 30 clans out there? There's all sorts of stuff you can use to kind of throw the assumptions of the chronicle into mystery.
I've never looked at it that way. I just thought it was, this style of epic poetry that is being used, and because that's what this is. It is one large epic poem, piecing together all of these things. And so I never thought about it that way. That's so interesting.
It's, and even if it is a mistake, obviously it wasn't written in English. It was written in the Enochian script, the language of the angels, etc. So somebody had to translate this at some point. And if you want to get into, the things like mistranslation and being able to tweak little bits here and there, did that mistranslation happen accidentally? Did it happen on purpose? What is trying to be hidden, etc. And you can always, this is not being able to trust the the unreliable narrator of the world of darkness, I think, is one of the things that gives so much mileage.
Yeah, and it's not just the 13 tablets either. I mean, the rest of it, a lot of it is an oral history, right? And so just like you would look at, the Bible, a lot has been passed down orally through, centuries, and written down or depicted in different pieces of artwork, or, sculpted into different things. And so a lot of what the historians had put together when they were researching all of this, Aristotle and the rest, was really just talking to people. He speaks in the intro of his travels, and going around and interviewing people and finding certain things. So it's different languages, it's different interpretations, all put together into one big piece. So who knows what is a mistranslation? Who knows what is actual, history? And maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe it's all just made up. I'm sure that a lot of members of the Camarilla will definitely, say that latter. So it's interesting, the different things that you can weave into your chronicle, just using this one piece.
And like, as you were saying too earlier, it is kind of arranged as an epic poem. One of the things that the 5th edition leans into a bit is that as vampires get older, you don't have, the mind can't necessarily contain hundreds or even thousands of years of memory. So in some cases, you have vampires who are doing things like creating sculpture or making art or, recording these bits and pieces of, vampiric morality, as they remember them, so they don't forget them, right? So they don't, so the weight of centuries doesn't erase them from their mind. And so you get here what, somebody kind of remembers or, wrote down so they wouldn't forget. There's a sort of kind of memento approach to this. What did I actually mean when I wrote this down? And so, it is a book of mystery that, the Sabbat takes as literal truth, that the Camarilla completely dismisses. The actual reality of it is probably somewhere in the middle. And as the storyteller, you get to decide that. And as the player in a chronicle that focuses on these sorts of things, you get to discover those mysteries.
Yeah, I love the fact that there's so many different versatile ways to use these things. Like you can use this in, a story that is more politically driven, right? And religiously driven. You can use this with intrigue. And if you're the type of table that, likes the, combat heisty thing, which my tables generally are. I mean, I know that's not a big thing in Vampire, but I definitely love that. Like you can have, here's a mysterious, fragment that has appeared in a museum, or something like that. And you have to get into, first of all, to see it, right? You have to make sure that is this a legit piece of the Book of Nod? It's a museum that's just, an exhibit that's just come to town. I can imagine it's like, oh, well, the museum's only open during daylight hours. Like, how do you get in there, right? How do you verify that this is an actual thing? And how do you get it out of that museum? Because it doesn't belong, in this case, it does not belong in a museum. Right. And so like in my mind, when I'm thinking about, Trivia and I have been working on this deluxe version and what's going to go in there. And, where we've been attributing different parts of the book to different actual physical pieces. Like, what is a scroll? Like we're looking through this, and a lot of it, has the indication, even in the references that are in here, the numbered references of where the item was found or where this piece of information was found. And so we're adhering to that as best as possible. And some of it doesn't have that. And so we are really deep diving into this. Like, what is a scroll? What is a piece of a tablet? Where did Aristotle de Laurent find this information? What belongs in his handwritten journal? And so while doing all of this, I've been thinking of story ideas like left and right, because it just springs so many fresh ideas, and I'm just really excited to use it all. So I just think that there's so much you can do with this.
I love what you brought up there too about this showing up in a museum, right? So let's say this thing appears wherever in your home chronicle domain, and it isn't even necessarily yet in the hands of vampires, right? Like, this has a historical weight in and of itself. This is, literal, chunks of that's not a very poetical phrase, pieces of biblical history, let's say, and maybe these are spoken by the angels themselves reciting them, and so being able to find them and validate them isn't always necessarily just a vampire versus vampire conflict, right?
Yeah. I just had a whole other idea while you were saying that. It's like, imagine, this is found in an archaeological dig, right? A stone fragment. And so, they're analyzing it, they're dating it, carbon dating, whatever. And it's like, oh, here's this thing that's from, 200 BC, right? And then the Vatican gets word of this, right? Or something happens. And then all of a sudden, speaking of other releases, the Second Inquisition factions, here we go, all of these religious groups start realizing, oh, this may be, we've heard rumors in our investigations, there is something in vampire lore that is tied to this. We need to get our hands on this. And suddenly you have a three-way war between the Camarilla, the Sabbat, and, factions, like government factions, or maybe four-way war, theological factions, all trying to go and get their hands on this piece of history for so many different reasons. Oh man, we're gonna have so much fun with this.
I think that's great, like storyteller, like chronicle building. You can have your story set up where, we are the anarchs and we're opposing the Camarilla, or we're the anarchs and the Sabbat is coming into town, or, we're the Camarilla and we're opposed to someone else. And, A versus B is a pretty straightforward conflict, but I love both, like, the aesthetics of the number 3. A triangle is more interesting than a line, but in a storytelling sort of situation, when the players are one of the points on that triangle and they've got two other factions to choose from, all of a sudden you start forcing the players to make decisions, right? Like, do we want to work with the Camarilla on this? They're trying to screw us over, but we really have to align against the Sabbat. Or, ooh, do we kind of want to get in bed with the Sabbat here and undermine the Camarilla and let them go at it, and then we'll swing in the aftermath to kind of prop ourselves up. And of course, I love that you mentioned the Second Inquisition book coming up, because again, as another antagonist faction, where the Sabbat goes, there goes the Second Inquisition, because the Sabbat is not subtle, right? They blaze into town and they're using disciplines and things are on fire and it's all brimstone and Cain and all disaster. And here comes the Second Inquisition, the entity, right? Or the coalition, because they're following, okay, well, we know to watch when stuff like that happens. So all of a sudden, your players, who are the movers and shakers in a given domain, are now dealing with, not just the default conflict, but the people shaking up the status quo and the people following in their wake. And, all of a sudden your chronicle can scope up huge. Ultimately, Vampire is about humanity, and so your players are going to be making decisions where, is it okay to kill people? Is it okay to kill Sabbat? It's probably okay to kill Sabbat. what are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice to banish these, to deal with these troubles? This thing that you've got, is this blasphemy? Is this holy writ? What is this? You're making all these decisions. They're going to have huge impacts on your humanity.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about, what we can do with the Book of Nod, and we've talked about the artifact, the Deluxe Artifact Edition. And those are all things that we can do at the table. And I didn't want to ignore our amazing LARP audience out there. So obviously, the Deluxe Artifact Edition can be used in your LARP. And there's so many different things that you can do. Can you talk about that a little bit?
You bet. One of the things that makes people so enthusiastic about LARP is that the sense of presence is so great. It's fantastic being around the table and playing vampire, but when you live action role play and you actually, take on the physical presence of that character and you're in the presence of others, who are also portraying vampires, and in the best LARPs, you've got these very well made or made up sets that rival good, high production value plays or even movies, and so these artifacts, these props that you can bring in then become things that really aid that presence. If I am the Nodist priest who as an NPC or a storyteller character is looking for people to follow my cult, or if I'm, the anarch player character who comes in and swipes this piece of the Book of Nod, and now I actually have the, the physical thing to carry with me, and I can show other people, when you work with just a little card that says, fragment of the Book of Nod, that's not quite as sexy as, a legit scroll or a cuneiform tablet, and these things help sell that being there experience that LARP really trades in.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be such a valuable asset to, both LARPs and table play. And, that's why we really wanted to do this. Now, it was you all that came to us and said, hey, we're doing this reprint of the Book of Nod together, but we'd like to see something else. We want to see what else can be done with it. Maybe we also reprint it, but it looks like it's handwritten or something like that. And it was that that really sparked in my mind. I had always imagined this being divided. And I think we talked about that a little bit, especially when we first started talking about doing just the plain reprint. It's like, oh, can we actually divide this up and make props and stuff like that, maybe for a later date? And then it was almost like a psychic connection, because I got, an email from Paradox that was saying, oh, we'd like to see something else. I was like, oh, well, now that you mention it, I've already been thinking about this. And so in your mind, what is the one piece that the Deluxe Edition could not, exist without? Don't put me in a spot to do something absolutely. I mean, this thing's already nuts. But what is the one thing that, when you've been, you've read the Book of Nod, what is the one thing you've imagined the most?
The thing that I think gives the most capacity to stir the pot are those different words of the clan founders to their clans, because those to me are there's so much. Vampire, the whole world of darkness is based on the premise of storytelling, and obviously you need a conflict to have a story. Otherwise, you just have a tableau. And the clans themselves are these kind of they're both occupations. They have a set of verbs that you kind of bring to the game that you expect to engage when you choose this clan, but they're also social groups. They're the kind of this is not just your family, this is the thing you do. And your family, by the way, has this 2000 plus or millennia old conflict with that family over there. So you've got that grudge, but you're also in the same coterie for whatever reason, because you need, protection against the modern knights. And now all of a sudden, here's this piece that gives you even further reason to be in conflict with them. And so you can resolve that conflict however you want. You probably don't want to be destroying your coterie member. Well, we'll let it get there eventually. But this can be something that you can look to as justification for conflict. As the Chronicle of Secrets or as we're talking about, the parts of it that are the harbingers of Gehenna, here comes the time of thin blood. You can literally point at, this says it's the time of thin blood. And so if we destroy all the thin bloods, we can hold Gehenna at bay, right? So you can get these justifications to, the Holy Writ says I should do this.
I mean, that's one way of looking at it.
But then, you've got the thin blood saying, I've never heard of this. This is BS. And also, do you know that that's true? And also, leave me alone, right?
So we're getting to the point where we only have about 20 minutes left, which is really sad. But I want to make sure that we get questions answered from the chat and everybody watching, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions. So Desiree, our amazing producer, is watching and waiting. And do you have any questions for us from chat?
I do have a few, so let me see here. So you kind of addressed it a little bit earlier, but for some of those that might have tuned in a little bit later, is there going to be a difference in terms of content between this new version of the Book of Nod and the previous ones?
Okay, so the reprint book, the hardcover book that we are doing, is a direct reprint of the original Book of Nod. We're doing this in the hardcover version. It's going to have the faux leather cover. It's going to look just like this, with the silver foil and the silvered gilded edges, right?
I'm jealous. Yours is better than mine. I've got the old floppy one.
Yeah, this was the hard to get one, right? But now we're making it available. Hardcover is better because it will last longer and it'll look really cool on the shelf. And so this is going to be a direct reprint. I've taken really special care in making sure that the paper quality and the printing quality is really clear. Nothing against the old 90s version, but the printing, the way that printing is done on certain types of paper, it's a little bit harder to read some of the text because it is, I know we've been showing spreads and stuff, but the text is sometimes in the pictures, right? It's because this is really, I'm trying to find a good example page. This is really, of course, now I can't find one. I'm finding all the white text. I mean, the white pages with text. Hold on. Okay, you're going to have to believe me. Like this, right? And so this is really an art book. I know that you've been showing Desiree a lot of like the cool pieces of art as we've been talking. The book itself is a piece of art. And so I want to make sure that everything is really legible, really clean, on the best quality. And so that's how the reprint is being done. The Deluxe Artifact Edition is going to have all of the same content. So you're not going to be missing anything. When we say these are fragments, it's not fragments of this and you're not getting the whole thing. You will get the whole thing. It's just split up as if it were the pieces that were found by all of the researchers and put together to piece together what this book eventually was. Because in the story, this book was, like Justin said, this book was actually made. Everybody did a lot of research, and then Aristotle de Laurent put it all together, shipped it in a big crate to a publishing house, and then a mysterious publishing house, and they printed it in the 90s, right? So that's actual real time for all of us. This is the crate of stuff that he collected, right? And so all of the pieces that are in here will be in that, just divided up onto really cool artifact like pieces. We will have parchment scrolls and stone tablets and photographs of things that he couldn't actually move and take home with him. Over hundreds of years doing all of this research, lots of different things were collected. We will have the notes that were taken. He spoke with different people around the world in a handwritten journal. There are lots of things that are going to be in there. So, but it is complete. I don't know if I over answered that question, but hopefully that really covers it. You're not missing out whether you buy one version or the other. You'll still have all of the info.
Well, and for verisimilitude too, like you were talking, and I don't know if this is still part of your plan, but having the tags as if they were part of the research project. So Aristotle, as he's coordinating all of this, this is Exhibit A, this is Exhibit 37, and so there's a sense that you're getting this kind of archaeological work in progress almost.
Right, exactly. So I mean, obviously, we're not going to be able to print his, like, if you in real life, if you had found a tablet, there wouldn't be a little notation printed on the back, but the museum that had collected or the researcher that had collected it would have that little tag on there, the little like there are in the actual Book of Nod, there are verses that are numbered, and then when you go and you look at the numbered in the index, you'll see the notes. So we're attaching those in a very real world, like in world way, so everything will look very authentic.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. What year was the Book of Nod first printed in the World of Darkness?
1993.
Like in the setting itself? The 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, the 90s. I thought it's well, the book itself was also like 1993, right? I think that's actually in world, no?
Well, one of the things that I like to do is kind of smudge hard and fast dates. Again, this goes back to it gives storytellers a lot of room so that a player can't just look at a book and say, oh, this is demonstrable truth because it says so on this page. And so like one of the things I like to do is print stuff that is literally in opposition to other stuff that we have in print. Because the way I like to look at things is questions, at least in terms of the printed material, the game material, the questions are always better than printing answers, right? You can game out the question. You can play the resolution of the question. Whereas if we just print an answer and say, oh, it was 1993, then, there's nothing more you can do with it. So let's say this was printed in 1994. Was there a alpha run of these that now you have, and the storyteller can make individual tiny changes in the text, or is this part of a collection of books, and this entire shipment was rumored to be destroyed? This printing was, but you've got a hold of it all of a sudden. So again, you get all of this room to kind of cast into doubt the veracity of this stuff, and figuring things out then becomes the content of a story or something you can do, as opposed to something that is simply just looked up and defined.
Yeah, and I also think that I like what you're saying about smudging the dates a little bit, because it makes every story fresh and relevant and in the present, right? And I think that's really important. We're talking about the Book of Nod and the lore. Obviously, there's a lot of lore involved here. This is the history of vampires, at least as most would like to know it, right?
If you believe it, sure.
If you believe it, but it is lore within, taking in world aside, taking the world of darkness and setting aside, as players, as storytellers, it's like, okay, this is a piece of lore, but we also want to drive gameplay, that's current. We want to drive gameplay that is accessible for people that may not have been playing for the last 30 years, may not have had this original book in the 90s. This is something that still exists now. Yes, you can see it in a timeline history, but it doesn't really matter, right? Because it still exists. It's still being talked about. It's still being whispered about in different circles. Like, is it real? Oh, I believe this. There's still, maybe vampires that are within your friendship circles, within all your connections, that actually do believe this, but hide it from you because they don't want to be discriminated against. They don't want, you don't know. So these are things, this is something that we really want to take into the present day, regardless of when it was. But yes, in a general timeline, it was the 90s, right? Just like the tablets that you may find, or the scrolls you may find in the deluxe version, a 14th century scroll. Yes, that's a piece of history. It's weird to think about the 90s as being history, but my kid just
30 years ago.
Listen, my kid just learned about 9/11 in US history class. So not to make us all feel old or anything, but that's a thing. It's history now. So yeah. Were there any other questions?
Yes. So this is for Justin. Is the Book of Nod like the Bible in that various writers did different parts, or is it all written by one vamp?
Yes, that's an awesome question. Nobody knows with any actual veracity who wrote this down. The collectors of it, the publishers of it, Aristotle de Laurent was the one who kind of curated and published the book itself. There is the Gangrel Beckett, who collected some of these pieces. Beckett and Aristotle have I don't want to say it's a contentious relationship, but there is kind of an adopted sire-child relationship there, even though they're not of the same clan. Yes, it's complicated. And then also one of the most prominent Nodist scholars is Sasha Vikos, who is an extremely potent and influential member of the Sabbat. So is Sasha Vikos giving Aristotle de Laurent legitimate pieces of this? And so, again, not knowing the source of this becomes where you can kind of spawn stories in the interstices. So absolutely, as someone in the setting, don't trust the book. As someone who is buying the book and reading it, look at this as a resource more than it is a gospel.
Awesome. Let's see. I lost the question. Will Revelations of the Dark Mother be reprinted?
Listen, Scott's not on this panel, and so Scott's a spoiler person. So everything that we are announcing as being reprinted was talked about yesterday. So you'll just have to wait and see.
All right. When is the pre-order of the Deluxe Book of Nod version available?
Now. Oh, it is available now. Please go to the renegadegamestudios.com website, and I think it's /pre-orders, but I'm not sure, so I probably should have that information in front of me. But maybe we can stick a pre-order link, Desiree, into chat right now. The pre-orders opened yesterday. This is a limited edition set, and so if you are interested, I highly recommend you place your pre-orders. We do want to say, and we mentioned this yesterday, we are holding back some of the crates for international consumers, for fans that are in other countries, because we do not have our international shipping up and running on this new website. So don't worry, if you're international, contact us. We will take care of you. We absolutely support all of you, and we want you to have this if you want it. So don't worry about that. Just contact us and we will get that sorted for you. But for people in the US, you can just place your order right now, your pre-order right now, and make sure you have this at your doorstep the day it comes out. It's going to be really cool too. It's going to arrive as if, it was sent to you in world. And so it's really cool. You're going to get this crate, a stamped up crate. It's going to be really cool. I'm really excited about it. I don't want to spoil too much, but yeah.
Awesome. We have a few people asking about a PDF version. Will it be included with the premium edition?
So you can get the PDF version of this on DriveThru RPG. That is actually available now. If you want the PDF, you can go ahead and get that. And the hardcover copy is not going to come with a PDF. And if it is made available in the future that way, we will let you know. I know that we are also working on getting this information into Roll20. That's for a later date, but it will also, when it goes to Roll20, it will be divided up into cool handouts and fragments. So it won't necessarily be just like this. It will be in a way that you can use. If you watched Trivia's panel yesterday on how to use Roll20 with your Vampire the Masquerade Chronicle, it was amazing. That is on VOD. And will be on our YouTube channel as well. If you missed it, the things that you can do with that platform are beyond amazing. So we will be making sure that that comes to Roll20. I don't have an actual date for that yet.
Let's see. This might be another, like, I guess, spoiler question. And Scott is in chat and he said he's not spoiling anything else. So,
Sure, he's not. Sure.
Do you have any game plans for other in-game books and artifacts?
Everything in my mind, everything's on the table. That's going to be a conversation with me and Justin. Once this first one comes out, I'm sure we'll be exploring other really cool stuff. I have a lot of plans. I have too many plans probably, because I'm really excited about everything that we can do. We have a lot more to announce. We're going to be having another World of Darkness weekend convention that will be announced, and even more will be revealed there. We've basically just talked about what we're releasing throughout the rest of 2021, but 2022 is already in the works. We've been working on a lot of stuff that we did not announce. Sorry, everybody. But that's going to come. We can't give it all to you all at once. That will come in the next convention news panel. And we have so much in store. The World of Darkness is huge. It's not just vampire, but we have a lot more vampire stuff coming too. And so you're like, it's not? So yeah, I mean, Justin, I don't want to take the lead on this question, but we've told you what we want you to know. How's that? but this is by no means the end. We have a lot of fun plans.
Yeah, and just to kind of to second that, it is a world of darkness, and I mean that in two senses. There is more to the World of Darkness than vampire, but also there is a sense that there are these differing opinions, that there are these different primary sources, there are different documents like this, and I think these are wonderful value adds, both as props around the table, to be used to enhance storytelling, but also to help with the world building itself. If someone can if you went over to someone's house and saw a book of Nod on their coffee table or something, you'd know a little bit of something about them. And if you didn't know anything about vampire, it would tell you something about the world if you just thumbed through it, right? So I think these things go a long way toward helping people understand the world and do stuff in the world, once they become available.
We're nearing the end. I think we have time for, one or two, depending on. I know everybody wants, you don't want to be spoiled. That's no fun.
I did also want to call the audience's attention to, at the conclusion of the panel here, we did talk a little bit about the Sabbat. Actually, we talked significantly about the Sabbat. We've got a preview of the upcoming Sabbat book that we're doing with Renegade, and that preview is going to be available at the conclusion of this panel at the worldofdarkness.com website. It's got a bunch of cool stuff in it. You'll be able to see the front and back covers. You'll be able to see one of the paths of enlightenment. You'll be able to see an antagonist. There's a discipline power in there. There's a kind of brief subsection of the Sabbat overview. So basically, it's kind of like a little buffet sampler of Sabbat nastiness that you can actually, there's game traits and usable stuff in there. So you can turn this loose on your coterie right away.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see everybody's reactions to that. It's going to be, the book is gorgeous. And it's coming soon. So again, you can, if you haven't placed your pre-orders for that, you can also go to that same pre-order page on the Renegade Game Studios website and place your pre-orders for the Sabbat, the Black Hand book. It will also be in retail stores near you, and you can get it there as well. I think we're going to wrap up. I want to just make sure that people know what's coming up. Next up for Elysium Weekend of Darkness, we have our Rivals panel. So if you play the Rivals card game, or if you haven't played the Rivals card game and you are interested in learning all about it, please stay tuned for that. That's going to be a fascinating panel. And following that, right after, they're actually going to be doing a live character card design with audience input. So we did this for Victor Temple at a previous Renegade Con. And it was really cool because the chat gets to basically give suggestions to the designer of the game, and you're creating a card live during the panel. And this one is going to be for Annabelle from LA by Night. So that's going to be super fun. And then I will be back with everybody at 5 o'clock. I'm pretty sure. Let me check. Yes, checking my notes. 5 o'clock, I'll be back to talk to Khaldun Khalel and Kat Evans. They are two of our awesome writers that worked on Second Inquisition. We're going to be delving into Second Inquisition a little bit more than we already have during this weekend in that panel. And then we're also going to be just talking about what writing for the World of Darkness is like, and how to get into the biz. So we'll be talking all about being a writer and a creator for the World of Darkness. And then so much more to come for the rest of the day. We have our LA by Night reunion recap. And I believe we have trivia later tonight as well. So lots of cool stuff. Trivia the questions, not trivia the person. Well, trivia is super awesome. So yeah, it was great talking to you, Justin. And everybody watching, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you later.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm going to bed. It's 11 o'clock here in Stockholm.
Oh,
so,
definitely. Have a
but
great
everyone enjoying the Elysium weekend, have a great time. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.